So, before we start this video, we felt like a disclaimer was necessary. First off, this commentary contains major spoilers for Deadpool 2, so if you haven't watched the movie yet, we'd recommend seeing that first. Secondly, we began writing the script for this commentary back in July of 2018. However, when we finally got around to recording our lines for this video, our target, Shinobi, has admitted that he doesn't look back on his response to Nostalgia Critic's Deadpool 2 review too fondly. That said, however, we feel that some of the issues he has here can still be applied to his later videos as well, and at the very least, someone who may be planning to make a response video in the future can learn from the mistakes made here. Also, any potshots, insults, etc. are just played up for jokes, and we don't actually wish the target any ill will. With that said, on to the video.
So, where's Sensei?
He's been late for 2 hours now.
Yeah, and what's worse is that lucky bastard is next to the booby lady.
So that's why he's called that. Hang on, what's this in the closet? Looks like it's for us.
Well, what are you waiting for? Open it!
To my new students, I had to
go
go
shopping for new body pillows since someone thought it was a good idea to use them as their decoy during training!
Hey, it's not my fault you keep trash lying around, Sensei.
While I was gone, I decided to leave you to read something to train your minds. Or your tolerance, whatever works. I should be done by the time you're all done with the video. Good luck, this one's a real stinker. Best wishes, Sensei.
Oh, he wasn't kidding about it stinking. Oh, I think I'm gonna be sick.
Well, I guess we should get this over with.
I'm ready.
What about him?
Oh, he'll be fine.
Yare yare. Into card o okeiru shimasu.
Why are you speaking Japanese?
Was that really necessary to let the intro play out for 18 seconds, since it was just that one picture with some music in the background and nothing more?
So I recently watched Deadpool 2. It was funny and an even better movie than the first one, with great humor and a bit of plot narrative. And so, I decided to check out Doug Walker's Nostalgia Critic Deadpool 2 video. It was terrible. Now, I'm a pro #ChangeTheChannel movement, and I stopped supporting Doug Walker after the atrocities he and his co-workers, and especially manager, had done to their fellow Channel Awesome members. But seeing the overall negative reception his Deadpool 2 video has gained, I had to check it out.
Where is your proof on the Nostalgia Critic's Deadpool 2 review getting backlash? Yes, I'm aware of the #ChangeTheChannel movement and the Not So Awesome document, which you're for. But maybe, just maybe, after his review of the Beauty and the Beast remake, the reason why his later episodes have been getting more dislikes than normal is because of that, and not because of the video's quality.
Not to mention that if you look at the like to dislike ratio of the reviews made after the Change of Channel movement happened, their dislike ratio is either similar to that of his Deadpool 2 review, or in some cases much higher, such as his reviews on Woody Woodpecker and American Tail 5 Goes West, and especially his Jack and Jill review. Now granted, other reviews getting more backlash doesn't necessarily mean that the Deadpool 2 review didn't get any, but considering that the like to dislike ratio of his Deadpool 2 is at least similar to that of his recent reviews, I fail to see how this review specifically got such a negative reception.
Now don't worry, I didn't watch it on his YouTube page. I used a loophole technique to watch it without contributing to his viewership, which basically is copy and pasting his link to a video download system.
How can you say his Deadpool 2 review got a negative reception if you didn't watch it on YouTube? There may be other websites or platforms you could have seen this on, but you only said you downloaded the video, which can be done without opening the link itself. Not only that, but if you've seen the like to dislike ratio on that review, you'll see that there are much more likes than there are dislikes. Granted, these are from June instead of May, which is the month your response was uploaded, so this isn't the most concrete of evidence. But guess who also forgets that evidence?
But before we go, let's go back a bit to his review of the first Deadpool video to see what he thinks of the character.
What I know about Deadpool, which actually isn't much. Every time I go to a con, there's like a million Deadpool, so I know he's a really popular character. I know he's aware he's a fictional character, so there's a lot of fourth wall jokes. I know he's like an action hero who can't like, or kind of an anti-hero, and he does a lot of comedy because he knows he's a character, and he like can get shot and either doesn't feel the pain or heals up or something like that. And I'm still not entirely sure. And he has a thing for chimichangas. That's about all I know.
So right off the bat, he barely knows anything about the character or why he's popular. Now this was when the first movie came out, so one would say he learned more about him in the meantime. Let's find out.
Was this really necessary? Yeah, he hardly knew anything about Deadpool. 2 years ago. A fan's gotta start somewhere, and they're not going to know everything about the character right off the bat. Something which you even acknowledged at the end of your point. If you want to show that he doesn't know much about Deadpool now, then that's fine, but showing a 2-year-old clip from when he hardly knew anything about the franchise doesn't help your argument, since people can learn a lot about a franchise during that time span.
Oh, wait a minute. What's with this description? Saddle up your unicorn? I'll admit, I'm not the most hardcore Deadpool fanboy out there, but when I think of Deadpool, unicorns are not the first things that comes to mind. As far as I know, no one ever refers to him as the self-aware comic book character from the 90s.
Really? You went on a small tirade over the description, which in this case was a nitpick on your part. One could argue that the unicorn part is a reference to the ending credits of the first Deadpool movie, which showed a 2D Deadpool stroking a unicorn's horn and rainbows was coming out of it.
Wait, were you implying that the unicorn was...
Yes. Yes, it was.
Oh dear.
Ignoring how Wade has been seen with a unicorn in multiple scenes, the reason why unicorns are associated with Deadpool is because of the comedic irony. The main character is a foul-mouthed mercenary who, in the first movie, carried all of his weapons in a Dora the Explorer backpack.
To top everything off, the video's description is not wrong, because even if people don't refer to Deadpool as the self-aware comic book character from the 90s, it isn't inaccurate to call him that because it fits Deadpool to a T. Think about it. He's a comic book character who's self-aware about the medium and originated in the 90s. So in the end, this really was a non-issue.
If he's familiar with the character, then he'd go with something like load your guns, sharpen your bee authors, and keep your chimichangas hot. The merc with a mouth is back. We haven't begun the video, and we already had something to complain about.
It's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted.
I'll spare you the rape that is his music and just go with the selected parts, with more appropriate music. A penis with a little hat on. Well, as one tweet once said, he was always a dickhead, now he looks the part. Written by man children. Well, at least they're honest for once. Intro by someone who loves Deadpool, and will destroy your opening credits if you say even one bad thing about him, you son of a bitch. No, you're not. If you love Deadpool as you claim to be, then the foul things we're looking at later should reflect it. And yes, I will say bad stuff about you, you egotistical jerk. And yes, I said testicle, you dick.
Okay, to be fair, I could see the first 2 interjections just being you taking potshots at the Nostalgia Critic, but that third interjection. Not only does it come off like you're taking the joke dead seriously, but you didn't even get the joke. Doug Walker didn't make the intro card. That text was supposed to refer to the Nostalgia Critic, since he's the one who's going to say bad things about Deadpool 2. Basically, the guy who made this intro is saying that if the Nostalgia Critic says anything bad about Deadpool 2, then he will destroy the opening credits. So, not only were you missing the point of the joke, but you took someone else's words and acted like Doug was the one saying them.
I am the one, the way your son don't need a gun to get respect upon the
By the way, Shinobi's going to be cutting out context here and there to save time or something. We'll address it when this is an apparent problem, so yeah, this is just a heads up.
Yeah, I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I love chimichangas, I'm Deadpool.
And as you probably figured out, that means we have to put up with asshole cosplay Deadpool. That guy at every convention who thinks he's really funny because he has a Deadpool cosplay, but he's really just an annoying dick.
First joke, and already fails for the sole reason it was already used in his Green Lantern video.
And how is him reusing a joke he used roughly a year ago inherently a bad thing? Especially since I had to go out of my way to find the video you were referring to just to see what the hell you're even talking about, since you didn't even bother to put the link to it in the description.
Seriously, why is this an issue? Doug reuses characters all the time in his reviews. Some examples being Malice and the Mad Hatter, Hyper Fangirl, Benny the Assassin, and Devil Boner. Now, if you had an issue with Doug doing this stuff in general, then that would be fine, but later in the video, you say that you liked Doug's Devil Boner character.
I am Cable Boner.
Classy. Actually, I like it. I like Devil Boner character. Too bad it's played by Doug.
Which is especially confusing since he's one of the most reused characters, so why is this instance of Doug bringing back cosplay Deadpool so bad?
But reusing characters and reusing jokes aren't the same thing, you might say. Not only have both characters and jokes been reused on the show, for example the Stephen King drinking game and angry video game nerd loving his boxes, but cosplay Deadpool is a character, a one-dimensional character, but a character nonetheless.
To add to this, running gags has been in hundreds, if not thousands of works before. The issue should not be whether or not Doug used these jokes, let alone these characters before, but the execution of them.
You know, honest trailers got Ryan Reynolds.
Oh wow, you're right! Well, why don't you use your clout with the crossover you did with them to get Reynolds?
Well...
I don't know. Maybe because of this, and the fact that you protected a sexual predator that showed that you are a piece of filth that no one wants to be associated with anymore?
Not so fast, dumb devil, you're the Lion King. Everybody's Kim of the White Lion.
Okay, I want to make something clear. I have not seen a single Rick and Morty episode, so I'm not going to pretend I know everything about it, unlike some person. But I did have some experience with this fandom, and they are terrible. I'm sorry, but you're going down the history for this embarrassing historical moment.
This one! I'm getting Rick! Rick! I'm getting Rick!
I'm not saying no fandoms without their toxic parts, but you guys make the Sonic fanbase look at you and say, you're going too far. So thanks a lot for sending the geek culture standings 40 years back, and just to confirm that you're a bunch of man children. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant people children. You don't want me to assume their genders or anything, right?
Hey, Shinobi, baby, darling! What does your tangent about the Rick and Morty fanbase have anything to do with Doug's skit? Your tangent here doesn't criticize anything about the intro skit or the review in general, so again, why is this relevant? Are you trying to say that the joke is bad because the Rick and Morty fanbase is bad? Because that's the only logical connection I can see here. If that's not what you're trying to say, then your point here is merely irrelevant. But if this is what you're trying to say, then your point just makes no sense. The quality of a joke is not determined by its fandom, it's determined by the execution of the joke. Because by this logic, I guess Star Wars references aren't funny, purely because the fanbase likes to harass the actors. I guess jokes about Sonic aren't funny, just because of its fanbase. The list really goes on, and I don't think you want to go down this rabbit hole.
Guess who's using an action figure as an avatar and jumped the gun? All the characters at that moment were about to address how a bunch of movies have done what the Deadpool movies did. Later on, they do talk about fan bases, including the Rick and Morty fan base, coming to the conclusion that more people focus on the bad side of the fan base instead of acknowledging the good. Now, doesn't that sound familiar?
And by the way, the Lion King ripped off Kimba has been long debunked and is no longer a matter of discussion. And if it hasn't been debunked yet, it's still a toxic topic to discuss, like how the Pokemon fanbase prefer to avoid the Ash vs. Red discussion because it's that bad and it's not a fun thing to discuss.
Well, ignoring how you don't bring up any evidence to back up your claim of the Lion King not being a Kimba the White Lion ripoff, this point would have been okay if you didn't follow it up with, oh, it's a toxic topic, therefore it shouldn't be discussed. Just because a topic is typically not fun to discuss, that doesn't automatically mean it should be off the table. Nor does that mean that nobody can have a civil and fair discussion about it, especially if it happens to relate to the review at hand.
And allow me to ask this one simple question. What's the point of the Rick and Morty parody here? If we're talking about a funny superhero, couldn't you bring a character like Freakazoid? At least he's similar enough to evenly match Deadpool, unlike a Doc Brown knockoff.
Even though one can make the argument that Doug was using Rick to present one side of the argument regarding Deadpool 2. Don't get me wrong, the skit itself I think is cringeworthy as all hell, but at the same time, it's not that hard to see what Doug was attempting to do here.
Also, bit of a nitpick here, but Freakazoid is in the review.
I'm in the film now!
And when he does pop up in the video, you don't even mention it, so...
Not only is this a big oversight on Shinobi's part, Rick would still be the better choice to call Deadpool out. While both characters are aware of the fourth wall, Rick is the only one to point out and criticize whatever tropes are flaunted. Think of it this way. Who would you take more seriously in a discussion? The scientist that consistently points out tropes and cliches? Or Dr. Draken doing his best impression of Woody Woodpecker? Now that I think about it, you never did show us what Rick was talking about, didn't you? Now what do you say we just...
So let's get this podcast with sketches started. I assume you want to talk about my impact on R-rated comic book movies, box office growth, and groundbreaking fourth wall humor in the same sentence?
Well...
Not so fast, dumb devil, you're the Lion King. Everybody's Kimba the White Lion.
Oh, you cut out context that would make Rick even more necessary to the discussion. since Rick would be the only fourth wall breaker, to my knowledge, that would call out DP's inaccuracy.
You think you're this big groundbreaker and you're not. There's other R-rated comic book hits, other R-rated comedy hits, and literally hundreds of fourth wall breakers before you.
While he's not wrong about other R-rated comic book movies or wall-breaking comedy movies, he also forgot the fact that Deadpool is a Marvel comic character, as in one of the most popular comics of all time, unlike the more cult-following comics he gave as an example.
Even though they were talking about movies specifically. By your logic, Blade came out before Deadpool in both film adaptation and comic form, and Deathstroke, the character DP is a parody of, came before Ninja Spider-Man in the comics, obviously. The Hulk, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the X-Men may not have debuted before The Merc with a Mouth, but they did get their own movies before Deadpool.
Hell, going by the Marvel character thing you just said, that would even include the Punisher as well, since he's a Marvel character too. Not to mention, even if we were to argue the time their comic books came out, Blade came out in 1973, while the Punisher started a year later as an enemy of Spider-Man, and then had his own series in the 1980s, predating Deadpool by about a decade. So in that regard, Rick is not exactly wrong here.
As opposed to any again. Another thing we forgot to mention was that even though Blade and Sin City and whatever are obscure R-rated comic book movies, they're still R-rated comic book movies. It shouldn't matter how famous Deadpool is or what company he's from. So this is basically dodging the point.
Okay, you're right, every fanbase has a few bad apples, and it's not the majority, but that doesn't mean you're still not a one-trick unicorn.
If Deadpool was a one-trick unicorn, then A, he would be an obscure character, and B, his second movie wouldn't be another hit in his cinematic run. You fail!
Okay, first off, can you please stop taking his Rick and Morty strawman at face value? He's just using these characters to play devil's advocate. In other words, he doesn't actually believe the arguments that Rick is saying, he's just using them to present possible counter-arguments to Deadpool's popularity, all of which he debunks and presents rebuttals to at the end of the review.
The Deadpool movies are worthy of their attention, and the mixing of two totally different genres, both done well, makes them a very different and enjoyable new experience. We've seen these elements before, but not together in this way, and as long as they keep finding new things to add to them, my guess is these movies will be celebrated for quite a while.
Secondly, something could still be considered a one-trick unicorn while still being successful. For example, the mainline Disney movies that were made before Princess and the Frog have been heavily criticized in the past for having very similar stories revolving around a heroine who wants a more extraordinary life and ends up finding true love after fighting a cartoonishly evil villain. And with some exceptions like Sleeping Beauty and Pocahontas, the movies that followed this formula generally did very well. Also, since he later used video games as examples to try and counter Doug's points, there are plenty of video game franchises that have been criticized for releasing the same game over and over again that have been doing well for years. Like Pokemon, Dynasty Warriors, Mario, Zelda, Assassin's Creed, and especially Call of Duty.
The comic book character created in 1991, Deadpool got a following as one of the few Marvel comic book characters to be aware he's a Marvel comic book character. He was foul-mouthed, violent, funny as hell, and constantly broke the fourth wall.
Notice that he didn't even mention the guy who quote-unquote created him, Rob Liefeld, or the fact that he's a ripoff of DC's Deathstroke all the way to his civilian name. Nor the fact that despite our old pal Rob being the one who created him, it was thanks to other writers like Fabian Nicieza that gave him his fun and memorable personality.
Have you seen Green Scorpion? I bet you'd like his content because you want Nostalgia Craig to go in immense detail. Not everybody needs to be a walking encyclopedia. All we need to know is who Deadpool is, what he does, and where he came from. And the critic did just that. We don't need to know who created Deadpool or how he was created, since that's essentially giving us Wade's life story.
Things even a casual Deadpool fan should know, and yet he failed to mention them.
And you failed to avoid stuttering.
Doing retakes? Pfft, that's crazy talk.
But again, we've seen characters like this before, so what makes him not only such a long-lasting hit, but worthy of such a dedicated following? What is he doing with his fourth wall breaking that sets him apart from other fourth wall breakers? Gee, I don't know, could it be marketing the persona of an anti-hero who acts like a kindergartner but with a team of underpaid writers that successfully convinced us they wouldn't want to punch him in the face?
How about we let the man himself answer this question without sounding like a condescending idiot, shall we?
The thing about Deadpool, I think, that makes him so widely loved by fans everywhere is he's like a real person. He's not like some fictional hero. He talks the way regular people talk. He thinks the same way. He's as disrespectful as most people are. You never know what he'll say or do next. He's like a guy you wish lived next door to you and would be your best friend, because it would always be a lot of fun being with him, and there'd always be a lot of unexpected surprises. The best kind of guy to write about or have movies about.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Does this really debunk what Doug said, though? Both Doug and Stan Lee are saying that Deadpool appeals to the basic immaturity and disrespectful nature that people have. Yeah, Doug said it in a much more condescending way, but that was while he was playing a character that's supposed to be disrespectful and condescending. So again, this comes off like you're taking his Rick and Morty strawman completely seriously.
It opens with Deadpool as an assassin for hire who...
Whoa, really blowing the budget on this one, aren't you?
What? It's a decent-looking city.
Yeah, I'm clearly on top of a building. All one of 3 dimensions are clearly being explored here.
Deadpool got a point here. This set looks so cheap as if the people behind it didn't have the budget for it. By the way, what happened exactly to the almost 90k you got from that Indiegogo campaign?
Go! Well, my job's done. I hit the on button. Alright, catch those fish, boys!
Money well spent.
Whether or not you think Doug's self-deprecating jokes worked here, it doesn't really have anything to do with the Indiegogo situation from a long time ago. Don't get me wrong, I thought that campaign was questionable as well even back then, but at the same time it felt like you only brought it up for the sake of a potshot.
As for the point about Indiegogo, Channel Awesome has reviews from more of its staff, news about everything nerdy with the Orbit Report, vids showing how some of the channel's props are made, bloopers, and even countdowns. Most of the Channel Awesome content aren't remotely similar to that clip you just played.
That's like the oldest trope in the book. You really think that writer's this talented? You're already shot, aren't you? Bop!
Okay, this is one of the parts you either agree or disagree with, but I didn't mind Vanessa's death in the movie that much. Maybe because I'm not used to Deadpool having a girlfriend, so it's not like Spider-Man where he's famous for his countless relationships. Burn in hell one more day.
I find it hilarious that you got on Doug's case for knowing jack shit about Deadpool, yet if you even did a simple Google search, you would see that in the comics, Deadpool had plenty of relationships. Besides Vanessa, you also had Siren, this bloated alien named Orxa, and yes, even Death.
Wait, he actually had sex with...
Yup.
Was me! Typical Middle Eastern European American gangster joke.
I call bullcrap on this joke. My memory of the movie is still fresh, and I don't recall the gangster's ethnicity even been mentioned. So this joke is terrible and tasteless.
But what if the hitman's ethnicity was hinted at instead of outright saying he was European? Did the hitman have an accent when he talked? Are you going to give us any evidence or examples of what the hitman looked or sounded like, so we don't need to take your words with a pinch of salt? Well, at least I know the answer to one of those questions.
You're right, it needs some salt.
I don't know, the idea of Deadpool being a dad kind of sounds interesting.
Your inability to comprehend this key demographic astounds me, Morty. Deadpool 2! The days of acting like a basement dweller whose contrived environment rewarded him with ninja moves and getting laid are gone! Now the hot chick is pregnant, he's raising a baby, and he has to learn the responsibilities of being an adult. Pre-orders through the roof, baby!
Oh, you mean like The Incredibles, The Titans, Darkwing Duck, Logan, God of War, every manga that remembers that human beings can grow up and start their own families? Or every What If One More Day didn't happen to Spider-Man stories? Because guess what? People do like the idea of superhero parents. The audience grows up, and making their favorite characters grow up with them makes them even more relatable.
The key point that you're missing here is Deadpool's target demographic. Doug is saying that Deadpool's demographic probably wouldn't like the idea of Deadpool maturing and raising a family, since the reason why Deadpool is so popular is due to how his character appeals to the basic immaturity and disrespectful nature in people, which is what your earlier Stan Lee clip confirmed to be the case. Yes, there is a target demographic for films with superhero parents, but the Nostalgia Critic doesn't think that Deadpool would fit into that due to how Deadpool's fanbase likes him for his immaturity. Now, if you feel that Deadpool would fit into this demographic, this would have been a better argument to make. But that isn't what you do here. You just say, oh, there's a demographic for that, without taking into account Deadpool's demographic.
Critic, tell us what happens next.
So Deadpool befriends an angry, awkward, overweight 14-year-old boy and...
Really? What he said? Really? You skipped the part that shows how this movie handled queer couples far better than Disney and Star Wars, and even Naughty Dog by not making it a huge deal?
Yeah, wait, what?
Oh, relevance, wherefore art thou, relevance?
So because Doug didn't bother to mention the relationship between Yukio and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, that is a problem. Why exactly? Especially since that relationship had all of like, what? 3 or 4 scenes to it, and outside the final fight with Juggernaut and the mid-credit scene, they were pretty much just there. What makes it a big problem when it comes to this is what you'll see literally right after that.
Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio are a couple. End of story.
Oh. Is it part of the plot?
Not really.
Then why bring it up to begin with?
Because I guess he's on Team Yukio Teenage Warhead. Never mind that in the scenes they're in, again, outside of the climax and mid-credit scene, they added almost nothing to the plot whatsoever prior to that. That's why I said they were just there.
Actually, that does bring up a good point.
I know, I was awesome in that, right?
No, I mean the tone these movies create. The fourth wall jokes are funny, but do they get in the way of the heavier scenes?
Depending on the writing and timing. Next point.
Did you have people review your scripts, or did you not have one to begin with? All that interjection is you saying what the nostalgia critic was going to say later on, making this point, well, pointless.
I take it I have to watch the show to know what this is.
He's a reoccurring character, yeah.
I have to stop that boy from performing the terrible crime of child murder.
How?
By performing child murder!
Russell was also this great supervillain who burns everything and everyone and not just children. Once again, an important detail changed for the sake of a joke.
Except he wasn't changing any details. From what I gathered, Cable's reason for going into the past was so that he could kill Russell in order to save his family. And since Russell is a child in the past, that would still be child murder. Just because Cable doesn't normally commit child murder, that doesn't change how his main reason for going into the past was so that he can murder a child to prevent future tragedies from happening. So in that sense, Doug's joke is still accurate.
Also, Russell killed a bunch of people in the future, including children. Cable, in this review, could have hated people being dead in general, but hated child murder just a little more to say that specifically.
Let's make up for the shitty Dark Phoenix movie we know we're gonna get!
X-Force kills the shit out of the scientists that torture the young mutants right before teaching a young mutant that it's wrong to kill the scientist.
Actually, they killed the guards, which most of them by accidents caused by Domino's luck power. Red shells don't usually count in these moral debates.
You know, something you could have argued, but for some reason you chose not to, was that Doug claimed it was X-Force that was killing the shit out of the guards, even though outside of Deadpool and Domino, everyone in X-Force was already dead when they were trying to intercept the convoy Russell was being held in before the car chase even happened.
Did you forget to stay consistent or something?
Russell, I know you think revenge will make you feel better, especially because I've gotten revenge on like 1 million people and by God it felt great.
What is the moral of this movie again?
No idea.
But killing him won't fix anything. It'll just turn you into a supervillain. A supervillain with the name Russell. And that's just uncomfortably weird.
He already got a super name, Fire Fist. But then again, this is written by the same guy who, for some reason, thought there was something funny about the name Jupiter Jones and called her Duck Dodgers, and insisted on calling Neo Tom for the rest of the Matrix month. I get a feeling he forgot how it felt like when everybody at school kept calling him Doug Funny.
Well, if I can quote the critic himself, this has been another pointless moment.
Is calling Russell Fire Fist even relevant to the review? In the movie, he is specifically called Russell.
Also, can I just point out how often you take pot shots throughout not just this response, but also in your other responses to the Nostalgia Critic's Jurassic Park reviews, where you keep referring to him as the dumbass critic, or even more recently, the douchebag critic. I can understand a pot shot every once in a while, especially if it's used as a joke, but when you do it so frequently, it just makes you look like a total prick to the guy.
Let's talk him or shooting.
No! I have a collar on, so I'll die for him.
Oh yeah, that's gonna happen. Yeah. Kill the franchise. Yeah, sure.
Logan says hi.
Watch any good Disney movies recently?
Well, whoop-de-doo, one movie defied expectations and killed off the main character. That still doesn't change the thousands of other franchises where the main character has plot armor. Especially in comics. And since Logan is the exception and not the rule, an experienced comic book fan or moviegoer would likely not buy the idea of the main character dying.
Well, that's that. Some points I ignored because they were redundant or had nothing to comment on.
Ha 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 ha.
The irony, man. It burns!
Can we please get on to the final thoughts before Shomes melts?
Oh, fuck you, Luck. Look, Shinobi, we all agree with you that Channel Awesome shouldn't have gotten away with basically a slap on the wrist when hashtag change the channel is a hot topic. But even with that in mind, this response was poor. He either took his joke seriously or completely missed the point of what Doug was saying. What really made it worse was that parts it came up as you saw his video once and put together this response without checking if anything would come back to bite you in the ass later on. Really, the best advice I could give is if you do find faults with any of his reviews, watch them more than once to make sure you have a strong argument against his points, as well as have people look it over for good measure.
Oh boy, do I not like your guts, Shinobi. Not necessarily because of the bad points, not because of your deadpan seriousness, but for rubbing that change the channel BS in our faces for half of your video. This response of yours felt so passive-aggressive, it's stupid. Showing off that not-so-awesome document verbatim got really old really fast. The reason you didn't get this or that is because hashtag change a channel and now everybody should hate you. Stop. Reminding Doug about the same bad thing does nothing but make you look ignorant. Yes, what was written in that document was awful, but it shouldn't be brought up so much, especially when no one in the review acknowledged that document. You want to know why? Because not only is this irrelevant to the review itself, but bringing it up even more would risk adding fuel to the fire when that isn't even necessary. Unless you have proof that the staff at Channel Awesome still treat each other like garbage, please bury the hatchet. Your commentaries shouldn't be filled with this much dead weight.
Now, if I can bring up some things I enjoyed about your video, I do really like your style of presentation. It's not often that I see someone who uses plushies or action figures to represent themselves in a way that looks good, and thankfully I do think your video is very appealing to look at, due to the pictures you've taken being very clear and the action figure you're using being fairly expressive. But sadly, those are the only positive things I can say about your video. Speaking of someone who also doesn't like the Nostalgia Critic or his reviews anymore, from a critical standpoint, your video did a horrible job at pointing out what the problems with his review were. When you were actually criticizing the joke rather than just taking them at face value, you never really explained what the problems with them were. You just said, "Ugh, it's cringy," or "Ugh, the fanbase is terrible," which doesn't really tell anyone watching the video what the problem with the jokes were. Granted, this isn't as much of an issue with your later videos, since while I have my own problems with them, I'll admit you do a better job at elaborating on your complaints there. However, if I could give some advice in regards to your overall content, I'd recommend that you tone down on the amount of potshots you make. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you shouldn't make them at all. I get you're more or less playing up your anger for a persona, and there's nothing inherently wrong with poking fun at someone you dislike. However, you do this constantly throughout your videos, and maybe it's just us, but there's only so many potshots one can take before it starts to get more annoying than funny, especially since your newer videos tend to be around an hour long, which makes the potshots come off as, well, padding. Anyways, please take what we said in consideration here, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
Fuck, I lost my lunch earlier, because making it through with you two made it not so bad.
Well, I'm done playing Ronin for the day. Can I get a little help?
Wait, how do you get stuck wearing a commentary avatar? It's not like these things have zippers or anything.
Did you try pulling harder, Zenny?
Of course I have, that's why I need your help.
Quick, Luck, help him!
I'll get the chainsaw.
What?
Oh shit, chase it!
No.
Oh, come on, Zenny! Just one slash will do the trick!
Hello, students, I'm back, and what the fuck are you guys doing? That's sick!
I swear it's not what it looks like.
You can't start a four-way! It has to have me in it.
What?